Recorded. All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Harmsen. Thank you for joining me on the 12th episode of One to Come Up, a podcast where we're go over your entire career from start to finish, highs and lows, everything in between, and then we see who you are and why you are the way you are. So, to get us started today, could you explain to the viewers a little bit about your company, Global Predictions, just so you know everybody knows kind of who you are and.
Yeah, happy to get into it. Happy to be here, Danny. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, of course, thank
We
you.
we I I started Global Predictions about 3 years ago, and we talk about Global Predictions as the main company with all the technology and the investment and all that. But really, our flagship product for consumers is Portfolio Pilot. And so, typically when we talk to people, portfoliopilot.com is really where we send folks. It's your personal AI financial advisor. And so for us, it feels like it's the sort of the right culmination of cultural moment with AI, some of the, advancements and changes in the Overton window where people are willing to accept. I don't think we're quite in a world yet where people are willing to, just hand over their money and let an AI manage it. But the idea that you could have AI and, some hedge fund inspired models give you actual fiduciary advice, give you potential optimization opportunities on your portfolio, on your financial health, potential tax optimizations, estate planning, scenario modeling, that feels like you know we're at sort of the right place, right time, and so that's what we've built with Portfolio Pilot. Right now, we have you know about $20 billion of assets on the platform already, and
Wow.
things are going pretty well. It's been very exciting. Yeah.
Well, it sounds exciting that anybody, even the average Joe, can have the such power in their hands and such great ways to invest their money. And, even like with the algorithms of a hedge fund. So Mr. Harmson, I typically like to start this podcast by going back to your college days. That's where, who I hope my target audience will be. Once I find some listeners. So could you explain your time there at the University of British Columbia? I know you were a Loran Scholar, so maybe you could explain what that was, or if you try to start any, startups or internships during that time.
Yeah, I feel like I did a lot over my 5 years in college. I was always pretty interested in engineering and physics and economics and AI and software and entrepreneurship. And so I ended up doing this engineering, physics, and economics minor program at UBC in Vancouver in Canada. The Loran Scholarship was pretty incredible. Basically, they selected 30, 30 students across the country and basically gave them a full ride to any university in Canada. And so I toured a lot
Wow.
of schools and ended up choosing the one in Vancouver. Partly it's a beautiful campus and city, far away from my home where I grew up in Toronto. It was sort of a chance to redefine myself, exactly the right program. Pretty big focus on international exchanges, co-ops, and the program itself was sort of like absolutely the right mix of theoretical and practical. And as you can imagine, I've done a lot of modeling and AI, in the 15 years since college.
Yeah, that really does sound like a very enjoyable college experience, and that's very amazing. Your Lauren scholarship as well. So I know it was immediately after or soon thereafter college that you started Iris Automation. So could you also explain that? Because you went through Y Combinator there, you were the CEO, and then also you kind of left. So with Iris Automation, you kind of went through the entire cycle with one company. So could you explain Iris Automation and your time there?
Yeah, I think it might even be worth going back a few years before that. Through college, I had started as part of the founding team of this program called UBC Orbit, and basically building a nano satellite, to go up into space.
Wow.
I had a number of different internships in software, building software systems for the FAA in the US, building experiments for the International Space Station with Airbus in Germany. I worked as the first software engineer at a company called Matternet doing drone package delivery in Silicon Valley. I worked at NASA at the Jet Propulsion Lab in LA, working on something called Mars Helicopter, basically computer vision systems for this little drone that would eventually make its way to the Martian surface along with one of the rovers.
Wow.
And as you can imagine, it was a bit of software, computer vision stuff, robotics, drones, and basically right after I finished school, there's a fair amount of experience already. I got involved in a number of clubs and groups and started an organization called the Vancouver Space Society, UBC at Home, and then the UBC Unmanned Aircraft Systems team. And so it was always, fun to start new things, and there's certain leadership opportunities there, and trying to figure out what I actually wanted to do with life. And then in 2015, started Iris Automation with sort of this big insight that if we're thinking about scaled package delivery and commercial drone operations, and if we're talking about hundreds of thousands or even millions of drones in the skies, basically these drones need to be able to see the world the way pilots do. And so the FAA and other Transport Canada and this civil aviation authorities around the world are all really worried about drones crashing into other aircraft that are already in the skies. Not so much the 747s and 737s and Airbus, passenger aircraft. They're worried about the hot air balloons, the gliders, the hang gliders. They're worried about the little Cessnas flying in farmlands in Kansas. And so for these drones to be able to see the world the way pilots do, basically we built a computer vision system on board the drone to be able to recognize and avoid other aircraft in the airspace. And over the course of 6-7 years, we moved from Vancouver down to San Francisco. We went through Y Combinator, one of the top startup accelerators in the world. We raised about $30 million, built a team up to about 50 people. We had 3 different offices. We even bought an airplane at some point so we can do real world, drone airplane encounters.
Wow, that's sick.
We had it was a big decision, and ultimately decided there was a guy on the team who was sort of a wild Alaska bush pilot, and he was very happy just flying every day with drones in the air and his aircraft, and you can imagine just somewhere in the Nevada desert. And we had an office in DC, and actively working with regulators to be able to improve just aviation safety. And then in 2021, sort of got a great opportunity to sell the company, and sold the company, and basically went through a big transition there. It was a big partner of ours. We had major clients, Fortune 500 clients internationally, and good opportunity to sell the company, and took that. And it was sort of a really good partnership with a company called uAvionix. And I took a big step back after selling the company, bought a house in the Bay Area. We started a family. My wife runs a startup as well in the pharma tech space, a company called Verisim Life. They've basically built a digital twin of the human body for drug development and drug discovery, and started a family. We have two toddlers now. We have a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, two boys. And I started thinking about what's next. What am I going to do next? And started into a lot of economic and financial modeling, and ended up talking to a whole bunch of hedge fund folks. And I was trying to find real, human financial experts. I ended up talking to a lot of salespeople and financial advisors, and couldn't quite stand the idea of giving 1%, 1.5% of my wealth every single year to a financial advisor. And so ended up just building my own financial advisor, building this wealth optimization engine. And that was 3 years ago. And basically over the last 3 years, I like to think we've built something really incredible. And that's where we find ourselves today.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. The overview there, and I would love to get into specifics of everything you mentioned, but unfortunately, we don't have the time for that. Um, but could you go real quickly go over your time in Y Combinator, because that's also something relatively new here on the podcast, and as you mentioned, that is one of the most prestigious seed accelerators in the world. So I think the viewers will find that very interesting. Your time there.
Yes. As far as I understand with Y Combinator, it's been going on about 10, 15 years now. And they have tens of thousands of applicants every single year. They accept about 1% of those applicants, 100, 200 companies. And, when I say companies, we're typically just talking about, you know, two co-founders. They come out to Silicon Valley, and for 3 months, they will, be here, work on their companies, really focus on building some tech, talking to customers, building some product. As you can imagine, it's a lot of AI stuff these days. And then, the 3 months are a set of dinners and advice, and, really just this like intense push to be able to accelerate the business and focus on one core metric and really drive that. If you're at $50,000 of sales, can we get to $500,000 of sales, by the end of the summer, by the end of this 3-month program? And then, after going through this crazy period of, hard working and stress and learning, then they put you on the stage in front of 500 investors. And, ideally you raise a big venture capital round, and, go out into the world and, actually really continue scaling up this business.
So that's well, thank you for that explanation of Y Combinator there. So how did you scale up your business? How, because you had mentioned you raised $30 million. I know that was over the course of several years. So how did you scale up your business from relatively small to then doing business with the government, with Fortune 500 companies? What was your model there?
Yeah, big part of it was unrelentless cold calling, and just sort of doing one step at a time. I think at the end of the day, the biggest difference between companies that make it and companies that don't make it is just, every single day, they make 1% better decisions, they work a little bit harder, and it's just like this constant growth over the course of 7 years that gets you to some like real successful outcome. And so, we started off, and we had a little box with an NVIDIA GPU on it, running some computer vision models. There was a little bit of open source code that we looked at, for the very first demo. We ended up writing a lot of our own systems and code. We put it on a drone. We flew it outside. We got a bunch of real video footage. We started just calling up potential customers to see what they actually wanted. We were thinking we were selling computer vision systems, and what they really wanted, we thought they would want the collision avoidance. And, at the end of the day, what they really wanted was the regulatory approvals. And so, we thought a lot about how we actually going to get the regulatory approvals. At a certain point, we need to prove out that this is actually, that it actually works. Kind of like with self-driving cars, you need to just put it out into the real world, put it on
Yeah.
real streets. You build the right safety systems. We hired PhDs in computer vision to work with us to continue scaling up the models. We had racks of servers in our office, with actual, GPUs just, running continuously. There was, a simulator that we built to be able to run through hundreds of thousands of these sort of real world simulations. Started this test site, right? And some of these things, we didn't know how to do it when we actually started it, but, started with a prototype, figured out how we could actually get it off the ground. We ended up hiring a former naval captain who actually properly ran this entire operation. He was amazing, and put added checklists to everything, and made sure that we didn't have any sort of safety issues while we went through that. Going and working with governments. Some of it's just showing up. You go to enough conferences, you meet enough people, try to get yourself invited to standards bodies and meetings, and setting up partnerships with different companies. Some of it is just asking, right? Do you want to buy this? You know, if not,
Yeah.
why not? And if you do that enough times, you do that hundreds, thousands of times, someone will eventually say yes. Or they'll say, well, I would buy it if you showed me it could do X. And then you spend a couple weeks and you build X and you have your first customer. And then you use the first customer to get the second customer, right? Hey, your competitor is using us. You should also be using us. And so so it goes, one foot in front of the other.
Well, thank you actually for that explanation, kind of that model and of that system and of that one step in front of the other, because I think that was some very good advice there of following what the customer wants and learning from the customer where to go and then to lead wherever the customer leads you. I think I hadn't heard that before, and I don't think that's been mentioned on the podcast. So thank you for that. Um, so then, you obviously sold that. So what was the kind of the end there? Why'd you decide to sell? Because you've also been our first person on the podcast here that sold their company. So what was kind of like the thoughts, because you had watched it for 7 years, grow, and then to like give it up. What was that like?
Yeah, it's a big deal, right? It's kind of like your baby at a certain point. You see it grow from absolutely nothing to something pretty incredible. I mean, revenues are growing at 30% quarter over quarter. We had incredible partnership. We finally got regulatory approvals in multiple countries. Um, I mean, at the end of the day, you think about the real motivation of starting a company, right? And a big part of it for me is about making real change in the world. And at a certain point in a company like this, once you go from, say, we're talking about self-driving cars, at a certain point, you focus on the core technology and convincing everybody that one day it's going to be possible. And then at a certain point in the company's history, you have to focus, you have to change your focus from, interesting AI systems and something truly novel to, telling everybody that this is plain boring, focus on safety. There's nothing exciting about this anymore. Right now, you just have to get in and accumulate hours on the road and drive. And that's basically the spot we were at with Iris Automation, right? Like we didn't really need to do any more major innovation. We had the tech built, we had the regulatory approvals, and it was just about, becoming a proper aerospace company, focusing on
Yeah.
safety and government contracts and, selling at scale. There's something very exciting about that as well, right? There's a whole new challenge with how do you scale up an IPO, but a big partner of ours, this like bigger aerospace company, gave us an offer. It was really good, and we discussed it at the board, and ultimately voted. This is the right next move for the company, and I'm very happy with it. I mean, at the end of the day, like Iris lives on, and they're doing incredible things, and the customer base keeps growing, the tech keeps getting better, and a big part of the team is still there, at this acquiring company. And I'm moving on to a whole bunch of new other exciting challenges. And I don't think that would have been possible if we didn't go through that in 2021.
Yeah, that's interesting that it's the innovation that drives you, and as you turn into a little bit of a monolith, that's what it is, lack of innovation and just becoming set in your ways. So, your next company, which is, I would say pretty innovative as well. Was there any, because times change so fast and it's a little bit of a different industry from the avionics industry to the finance industry. Was there, do you think that starting that first company helped you with your second company? Do you think anything rolled over, tied over? Or was it kind of like starting from scratch again and you had to rebuild credibility and
Uh, I I think there's a tremendous amount of overlap, right? On in so many different dimensions. On one hand, a company like this is basically just going through lots of iterations every single day, right? It's not ever just one idea. you know you hear a lot of stories where someone's like, oh, I had the best app idea, and all I need is just like to build it, and then we're going to be millionaires, right? It's never actually like that. You end up with some initial idea, and you have to refine it and talk to customers. And in that sense, it's the same. It's fundraising from the same people. It's building a team of incredible people. There's all kinds of HR and administrative problems. It's even the kind of tech we're building, right? It's in a fairly regulated environment, whether we're dealing with the SEC or dealing with the FAA, right? It's similar challenges, similar constraints. It's not just one big deep learning, AI model. There's a mix between, sort of traditional physics-based models and like traditional computer vision and deep learning with Iris automation. And here there's sort of these hedge fund inspired models that we use together with modern AI techniques. There's a tremendous amount of data you need to deal with. There's all kinds of optimizations you need to be able to do. And then, at the end of the day, it's partnerships that drive a lot of the business for the company. And so I think the other big part of it is that we made a lot of mistakes early on with Iris automation. In this first couple of years, we were so inefficient with our time, it feels like, that we focused on the wrong things. We should have just focused on the real bottlenecks, grew it in a certain way. In hindsight, maybe some of that naivety was useful because it led us down a path that with hindsight we shouldn't have gone down, but it ended up leading to some evolution or some learning that was very useful personally. And then even just some of the contacts and having sold the company is obviously very useful for attracting more capital and fundraising and convincing people to join you. But then there's a whole new set of challenges around fintech and building a consumer business and an app and the psychology and marketing that goes along with that. So it's been a lot of fun just to learn continuously. I feel like I'm in a different role every 3 months.
yeah, it really certainly seems that you like innovation and that drives you. Would you consider yourself a serial entrepreneur? Because that's a little bit of a kind of a funny topic on this podcast. We have some serial entrepreneurs that like it, some that don't, some that like the larger monoliths, some that like the small startups. So
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think technically serial entrepreneur applies. I think that like for me, it's never really about building businesses or making lots of money. Like at the end of the day, it's all about impact. And I just think there's not enough entrepreneurs just starting something new or trying to make a really big change in some like relatively old school industry like aviation or fintech. And arrogantly, I think I can do it a better way. And so that's a big part of what drives me. But like whether I want to start another company, in 7 years or 4 years, or continue with global predictions for the next 25 years, uh, time will tell. It's I don't have a major itch to start another company, but maybe I will in 7 years.
Yep, only time will tell. And as you said, you never know where it's something's gonna lead you. So could you yeah, touched up also on Verisims. I know that's not your company necessarily, but it does sound very interesting, and it does sound kind of like a parallel to what you're doing for the economy, but for the human body. So what is that Verisims? Because I had never heard of anything like that.
Yeah, my wife's company, her name is Jo Varshney, and basically she studied oncology, basically cancer research and gene editing and software. And what they've done with Verisym Life is really cool in the sense that drug development is really slow, right? Typically, if you find a cell in a petri dish, or some drug in a petri dish that works really well, then from that point to actually getting it into some commercial build outs, actually into commercial production on a shelf, is 10 to 15 years of work and hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars spent. And so what they've been able to do is simulate and predict this entire this entire life cycle virtually in software, you know, in hours, instead of 10 to 15 years. And
Wow.
obviously they can do that with a lot less expense as well. And so basically what they're selling is these they're selling a prediction model and insights about which drugs, which candidates are going to make it and which ones are not going to make it. And you don't need to be right all the time for that to be very, very valuable. And their big bet is, if we can do this well at scale, then we can maybe shorten the time it takes to get drugs to market, and put a dent in some of these major diseases. And so far that's working really well. They work with the Mayo Clinic and with the FDA, and some of the biggest pharma companies in the world. And so far so good. They've also raised something like $20 million,
Wow.
and they have a team of 35 people, and revenue keeps increasing, and they have all kinds of drug development partnerships, and it's an exciting time for them as well.
Wow, so this is certainly very exciting for the future as well. Both the human body and the economy can be predicted. Two things that previously were considered, volatile and little known about them, we now can predict them. So and I guess we're getting towards the end of our time here. So this is the perfect segue. What do you think the future is going to look like? I mean, I think of everybody that I've asked, you might have the best answer to this. Um, I don't know, like for you personally, for the world at large, what's the future looking like?
Uh, yeah, I'd be super, super wide open question, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I think one of the biggest things that, I mean, obviously, I think that the future looks very similar to the kinds of things we're building, right? Partly just like personal bias, about how I see the world, and partly because, I'm actually building it. I think we're going to be successful. I think, a lot of AI is going to change knowledge acquisition and access to knowledge. But I actually think the biggest impacts of AI are going to be on the amount of personalization that we'll be able to do. And so, predictive models, or I don't know, say you want to work out,
Yeah.
and get really fit, and in terms of like a completely different example, right, of what we've been talking about. But like right now, the best way to work out and get fit is typically, I don't know, read a lot of books, listen to podcasts, just go to the gym and try it yourself, experiment with different foods, see what works. But, you know, probably the best way, if you're have the money for it, is just hire a coach, right? Hire a nutritionist. And at the end of the biggest thing that they can provide to you is some sort of personalized plan that works best for you. That takes into account the kinds of foods that you like to eat. That takes into account your body shape and the people around you in your life, and what you have access to and where you live, and the kinds of things you like to do, and the same thing with the fitness. And so the level of personalization that you could get
Yeah.
as a rich person right now, I think will be similar to the level of personalization that you can get access to with AI over the coming years. And I think that's going to be the single biggest change that sort of, people in, society are going to realize. There will be better software engineers, and it's going to be helpful for marketing and all these things. It's going to have a big impact on white collar labor.
Yeah.
But I think in people's like daily lives, it's the amount of personalization and access to, just better and better and better resources that's going to be I think a huge defining change. And that's what we're doing with Portfolio Pilot. Personal, truly personalized financial advice is very difficult to get access to unless you're running your own family office. Right? Even if you go with some financial experts, they're most of the time just going to give you fairly cookie cutter advice, you know, from the funds that the firm has decided is the right model, and they can tailor it a little bit to your objectives and financial situation. But they have 50 to 100 other clients, and so it's kind of hard to personalize for everybody. So you have to pick and choose. Whereas for our AI system, it can be a truly personalized experience you know, for the 10 people that use the platform, or the 10 million people that use the platform.
Well, Mr. Harmsen, I really enjoyed this conversation, and it's exciting to have gotten you at this time before all this innovation happens, and this time where we know where it's going to head, and now all that's left to do is to do it. So, thank you for joining me today, um, and I really think the viewers will enjoy this episode and getting a little bit of a realistic view into the future. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Of
Cheers.
course. All right. Good night.